upcoming collaborative album with Suzi Quatro. Comes out on Friday. I can't say that I would have imagined a KT Tunstall Suzi Quatro album at any point.
Why is that?
I don't know, but yet it is manifested. Okay,
Yeah.
Did you ever think, and I know you were part of the documentary a few years ago, did you ever think you would do an album with Suzi Quatro?
I think one of the things that's so hard to imagine when you're a musician, a touring musician, is actually having the time to get in a studio. Sorry, my dog is getting overexcited. Shush, Minnie. Is having the time to get in a room with someone else and do a project that isn't part of your own kind of rolling studio album itinerary, if you like. Because it's really outside the box. And so I think I'd always imagined at some point that I would do a collaboration album, but I had no idea who it would be with.
Yeah.
And it really stemmed from meeting Suzi after we did this fantastic, huge Elvis tribute show in London, I think in 2007, maybe. And she caught me after the show, and I obviously loved her and knew who she was. And she said, "Hey, KT, I want to give you the baton." And I was like, oh my God, what baton? What am I getting given? And she said, I just really recognize myself in you. And there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of women doing the same thing, which is just a very head down, not really concentrating too much on being female. It's more about being a musician first. And so I kind of immediately felt like there was quite a lot in common with us.
Who, if anyone, were dream collaborators growing up, getting interested in music? Who were they?
So many. I mean, from my formation, so like my very formative years, I'd say the first artist that it entered my head that maybe I could work with one day was Beck. So I became obsessed with Beck at 14 when my father got a satellite dish and I finally watched MTV. And so, I was an 80s kid, so I grew up on Whitney and Madonna and Prince and amazing songs and amazing artists, but I never looked at them and went, I want to be that. But when I saw Beck, I was like, oh, I think I want to be that.
Right.
I think I want to be like a busker with money to make cool videos. And then as I got to know music a bit better, Jack White was another person that I still find extremely inspiring and authentic and kind of pushing boundaries, yet still staying true to his kind of, traditional techniques. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many, but they were definitely two of the early ones that really, and I mean, Chrissie Hynde forever. She's always going to be one of my absolute heroes.
So you've several occasions happen. The documentary happens, and I've heard it described in some of the other interviews, BBC Breakfast interview, etc. But what's the first point where you go where there was this back and forth, and describe it again in this interview? But what made it go like, okay, we actually could really work together and sit down and write songs together and record something, whether it's an album, an EP, a song, whatever? What was that first moment where it became like, this is reality?
It was a super clear path. I was in the middle of making my trilogy of records, and I went very 70s prog and did a trilogy in answer to people saying that no one listens to albums anymore. And I was like, right, well, I'm going to make 3. Nice. And it was an awesome 7-year project. It was very inspiring and enlightening and a really fulfilling process. And in the middle record, the albums were based on soul, body and mind. And the middle record of Body was a real rock and roll record, and it was being produced and partly co-written by Nick McCarthy, who was an ex-member of Franz Ferdinand, very big fan of his work. And we were just recording in his little garage studio in London, and we thought it would be so nice to do a female collaboration with a rocker I loved on this record. And Suzi had said that we should work together, and I said, well, why don't we reach out? So Suzi and I did a writing session, potentially for a song to go on Wax, my 2018 record. And when we did that, we went, whoa, hang on a minute. this feels like it's actually should be something else, because the sum of our parts really seemed to create something new, which was not quite all her and not quite all me. And it was an extremely easy flow. We had so much to talk about. We talked more than we wrote songs. And those conversations was where these songs just birthed so easily from. A shared experience, but coming at it from different generations and different styles. It was really fascinating.
I had heard, was it Overload was the first
That's right.
song?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about that song? I've not yet heard it. I'll hear it on Friday. But what about that song? And was there anything in particular that you noticed went, there's the spark?
Well, so I went to Suzi with a kind of slightly unhelpfully predetermined idea of what we should make. It's never good to plan like that, but it just happened. And I was excited because I was making this rock record and raw record, which sounds like a garage band. I went to her with a really big riff, and we worked on it together. But I said, let's start with just a monster guitar bass riff that we're both playing. They're both like our extra limbs, my guitar, her bass. And it's just a very signature calling card for the two of us playing together. It's just playing a unison riff on our instruments. And it just goes, it's got this like real 70s glam rock stomp kind of vibe to it. And the song is about our kind of fascination and addiction to that extremely intense day-to-day life of our job and doing what we do and putting yourself out on stage completely lyrically, musically, performatively, and then having to kind of dig into the soul to get the material in the first place. And I think that when we wrote that song, and we also wrote another song called Good Kind of Hot, they were the first two. And then we sort of realized that we were going somewhere much more tender. And these two songs were very brash and kind of, a lot of swagger to them. And I think that what we wrote later, actually retrospectively, changed a little bit of how those songs sounded when it came to the production and mixing, because they're kind of on the rock edge of what we did. And then on the other edge, there's a song called The Illusion, which is just, and Truth Is My Weapon. These just really very emotional, soft on the inside and on the outside, so there's a real spectrum of material on there, which we've ended up feeling very proud of.
I'm going to ask a question I ask of pretty much anyone when we're talking about a new album. It's who's your favorite child question? Do you have a favorite song on the album?
I would have to say The Illusion. It's just one of those songs where, sorry to sound like a conceited a-hole, it sounds like you're covering a classic. It sounds so familiar. So when you write songs like that, it doesn't happen very often. You're drawing upon your own favorite classics, subconsciously or consciously. There wasn't one song in particular that we were drawing on, but there's a predictability to it where it sits in the canon of older songs, yet we managed to fashion it in a way where it was a brand new song, and it was really a song about the nature of reality, that you can build your own prison, particularly being well known, that you can kind of create this very weird existence for yourself that you can justify. And it's very Wizard of Oz, it's a very mad kind of Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole that you can go down. And the illusion of what's real, it's like you have to constantly check yourself all the time, every day. Is this real? Is this what I want to be experiencing? Is this how I would like my reality to be? Because maybe it's just completely up to me. So that song was really meaningful, and I just think it's so beautiful as a duet. It seems quite old-fashioned to write an original album of duets, as when you're not just a singer with a rapper.
Mhm.
It's actually like two songwriters. And so it's been a really beautiful homage to those older records of duets from the past.
Talking with Carrie just before you hopped on, and I don't know if you had heard right as you logged in, we're talking about your voices, yours and Suzi's voices sounding similar enough that they seem to be almost the same. Not, of course, they're not, and tonally there are differences. Um, did How did that affect your harmonizing and the blend of singing with someone that's got a sonically similar timbre to yours, not identical, but then how does that affect the vocal collaboration?
Yeah, it's a great question. Suzi sits slightly lower than me, pitch wise, where she's naturally comfortable, but she also does this unbelievable scream when she sings. Ah! And I said to her, how many times do you do that a year? And we like actually worked it out how many gigs she does, how many times she does it in shows, how many times she would do it in rehearsals, and came up with a number. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a lot. And because she does it like 4 or 5 times a show, so she's got this amazing range. But I've noticed as I've got older, my voice has deepened considerably. Hers too. If you listen back to Devilgate Drive and Can They Can, she really singing like right at the top of her break a lot of the time. And so usually I would opt to take higher harmony on top of her. And one of my favorite things to do is sing harmony. And as a solo artist, I only get to do it when I do backing vocals on my own records. So I really relished the opportunity to kind of take that role, the harmonizer role, a lot of the time. Or she would do a lower harmony on the melody, which is also a very interesting. It's an interesting take when the harmony is lower. It gives it a slightly more masculine, heavier vibe, which is very interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's not common, but there's a song, and I think I'm actually thinking of maybe it's a Daryl Hall, John Oates song, but I'm thinking of it right now, where I think there's a lower harmony part, and it stands out. It's distinct. You're right. It's not a common thing.
I'm always really excited on my own songs too, when I'm like, oh, the lower harmony really sounds better than the higher. You just automatically brighten, enliven, energize, euphoricize, if that's a word, a song with these higher harmonies. And when you do lower ones, it's much more textural, it's much more grounding, it's much more kind of supporting trying to make you still really hear that melody, right, and not actually getting too excited.
Right, that too. Yeah, you can now tell us the rest of the world that by and large has never worked with Suzi Quatro. How could you describe working with her in a way that someone would have to do the same thing and work in a studio, write a song with her? Describe Suzi, the musician, the writer, the collaborator.
She's wonderful. She lives her life from the inside out. She's so open. She's extremely forthright. So I will tell you, first of all, that she's a very inspiring, extremely high energy person to work. She's just ticking all the time. And then, so now that I've told you this, I can also tell you this funny thing, that when we did a video the other day, I said, do you remember the 80s drugs campaign that just said, just say no? I said that she needs to have a t-shirt on her merch stand that says, when it comes to Suzi Quatro, just say yes. and
Good point. Yeah.
And I mean that from a respectful point of view, because she's been around more than twice as long as I have. She's come up through a generation where she was literally the first female rock and roll musician on stage playing an instrument ever. She told me a story of Chrissie Hynde was working for, I think, the NME, writing as a journalist, and had come to interview Suzi and gave Suzi a cassette of her demos, saying that she wanted to be like her. Joan Jett was a huge fan. She doesn't quite get the props, I don't think, that she should, for how trailblazing she's been. and and she's still doing it. She's not really that interested in being lauded as a pioneer, because she doesn't really feel like a pioneer, because she just said, I was doing what the guys were doing. I just happened to be a girl. And but she's still forging all the time, writing all the time. And part of me has had to have the humility to go, I think she's earned the right to have the say here. And she hears it, and part of me has enjoyed this process, that I can sort of relax a bit, that it's a collaboration. It's not, she's used to being a solo artist too. So for me, it's been a great exercise in just trust falling and going, do you know what? Let's see. Let's let her call the shot on this. And it's worked great. It's been really wonderful, kind of, deferring to her on quite a lot of the choices, while still maintaining my own character and kind of preferences through it. But I think because she is the older generation and comes from that stylistically different songwriting era, it's the era I love the most, really, from a writing perspective. And so it's actually just such a thrill to work with someone who is from then, and to experience the process of how you make music then, because that's how she still does it. So it's been a beautiful window on a period of music that I adore.
So then, did your musicianship, your approach to music or writing, did you learn anything? Did you evolve any through this process over the past years or so, all the sessions? And so do you feel yourself changed as a musician, having worked with Suzi Quatro?
Absolutely. And one of the things that she really taught me was to expand my vulnerability. There were places through our conversations where she found very tender spots in me that I hadn't really excavated on purpose, deliberately, because they were a little too painful. And she would dig in there with a dessert spoon, just like getting into the little nooks and crannies. And she really challenged me to the point where sometimes I was like, not doing this, leaving the room now. And she'd be like, hey, this is what it's all about. Like, why are you here? And I would listen to her, and I would work through it, and I would just let the anger go, or I would let the pain go. And I would realize that really is the best stuff for songs. It's the stuff that is hard to say. And when you put that into words, it's very useful to other people when they hear those songs, and it's unspoken emotions that they relate to. I think that's probably the most powerful aspect of songwriting. So yes, she taught me that. She taught me to let go a little bit and relinquish all the control as being the usual captain of the ship. And I guess it's also been a mirror. She's still gigging like crazy at whatever. I think she's 71 or 2 now. And there's no way I want to be doing that. I definitely want to be like a ceramicist living in Santa Fe, like doing the odd show. But it's been very interesting seeing her absolute drive and passion for it at her age, and going, wow, we're different. That's not me. I respect it hugely. She's got the energy of a 20-year-old.
Could you see yourself doing a sequel? Another Face to Face 2?
I would never say no to that, because it was such an exciting and very easy process, but I don't know when. I feel like I'm entering, I'm about to hit the 20th anniversary of my first record. I've just finished a ton of touring and really feel a very deep pull to flex other creative muscles and do other things. So I just want to kind of bask in the real appreciation of this record first, but I certainly wouldn't say no to that, of course.
Well, maybe it'll happen. Who knows what's to come? That's the nice thing is it looks like you got plenty of careers ahead for both you and for Suzi. KT Tunstall, thank you for taking time to
Of course, thank
chat
you.
today about the album. I'm looking forward to its release and at the end of the week. I'll give it a full listen through and
Yeah.
all the best going forward. Looking forward to hearing all of that and all the best with the promotion of this project.
Thank you so much, Luke. Really
You,
enjoyed talking to you.
you're welcome. Take care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.